Kyla was driving her Pontiac Vibe when the driver of a GMC Yukon failed to yield to her at an intersection where he had a stop sign, but she didn't. When the Yukon began crossing the road in front of her, Kyla had no opportunity to stop before slamming into it. Thankfully, firefighters arrived only 4 minutes later to provide aid. What was the Yukon driver's excuse for causing the collision that totaled Kyla's Pontiac? He told the police he didn't see her car approaching, in spite of the clear line of sight he had long before he started across the road. Kyla wanted to take this opportunity to remind our viewers that you shouldn't sit too closely to the steering wheel, as this can cause injury in the event of a collision by preventing proper deployment of the airbag. Tanner was driving his Ford F-150 at 35 miles per hour when the driver of a utility truck suddenly pulled onto the road in front of him, and slamming on the brakes wasn't enough to avoid a T-bone collision. Both drivers pulled into a parking lot to exchange information as police responded. Tanner's F-150 was totaled by the insurance company, but he bought it from them for $1,000 and got it running again himself. This proves that totaled doesn't mean irreparable or worthless. It just means that Tanner wanted to fix it more than the insurance company did. Once he had it running again, he replaced it with a newer F-150 with a crew cab. Aaron was approaching a traffic signal when it turned green, and he proceeded through the intersection at about 25 miles per hour. Suddenly, the driver of an oncoming Chevy Impala turned across his lane, and he couldn't avoid a collision. The head-on collision totaled both the Impala and Aaron's Chevy Malibu. Paramedics and sheriff's deputies responded almost immediately after both his vehicle and his phone called 911 automatically. Ironically, the Malibu was actually a rental, as Aaron's Ford Taurus was in the shop for major repairs at the time. He's very thankful he paid for extra rental insurance, although the Impala driver did admit fault at the scene. Only a couple of weeks after Steve helped his friend Corey install a new engine in his Subaru Outback, Corey was making a protected left turn when a red light runner collided with him head-on. When police responded to the scene, the driver of the black Hyundai told them her light had been green, and that Corey had been speeding through the turn to beat the light. They might have believed her story if not for one thing. Corey's dashcam had captured the event, proving the other driver was lying. She was cited for failing to obey a traffic control device and for driving distracted. Sadly, both vehicles were totaled. Juma was driving down a highway when a Honda driver blazed past him, evidently not noticing the Michigan State Police car in the far left lane. The cop noticed him, though, and immediately took off in pursuit. Once behind the hasty Honda, he wasted no time pulling it over. Man, I'm loving all the instant justice in this episode. This submitter was heading across an overpass on a frigid Michigan morning when he found out the hard way that the overpass had frozen over and hadn't been salted yet. When the driver of the Jeep ahead of him spotted wrecked cars and tapped the brakes, they lost control and spun into the existing wreckage. Our submitter did the same, and this was only the beginning of a 30-vehicle pileup. Our submitter's dashcam audio includes several more impacts as more vehicles smashed into his Volkswagen Jetta. He told us several people were injured, but thankfully everyone survived. Our submitter was spared from any severe injuries, and once the overpass was shut down, he was able to retrieve his belongings from his Jetta. Kayla was on her way home from taking her best friend to work when she watched a Ford SUV from her left run a red light before smashing into another Ford SUV. The SUV that had run a red light continued rolling until it slammed into a power pole. Kayla ran to check on the occupants, and she said they were confused as to what had happened. She offered her dashcam footage to both drivers, and she let the occupants sit in her car while 911 was called. She's grateful that her own vehicle, which is less than a year old, wasn't involved in the collision. Kazi had just picked up some food from a restaurant and was about to make a U-turn when he slammed on the brakes. He'd noticed two oncoming vehicles collide and stopped just in time to avoid them sliding into his Lexus IS250. It looks like the driver of the Ford Escape had tried to quickly pass the pickup truck before losing control and hitting it. Kazi stopped and gave the pickup driver a copy of his dashcam video. He told us the Escape driver tried to blame the pickup driver for hitting her. Thankfully, nobody was injured. Sam was on his way home in bad weather when he crested a hill to find two pairs of headlights ahead, one of which was in his lane.
What the
Doing? You mother. Gas go, brother. Gas it up, brother. Yeah, perfect.
Evidently, one car was stuck trying to get up a hill and another driver had gone into Sam's lane to get around them. This forced Sam to go off the road to avoid a collision since he couldn't stop while going downhill. Sam barely managed to make it back onto the road without getting stuck in the snow himself. That was a close call for a couple of reasons. Brian was driving when he watched an impatient driver run a red light and get T-boned by an SUV. Brian pulled into a nearby parking lot. When law enforcement arrived, he gave them his information so they could request his dashcam footage. Dan was headed down the interstate with his wife and daughter when they heard a loud scraping sound coming from behind them. After noticing the semi-truck that had overturned after taking an exit faster than the 25-mile-per-hour speed the signs recommend, Dan turned around and called 911 while his wife and daughter checked on the driver. Thankfully, the driver was okay, and Dan wanted to shout out his wife Deidre and daughter Madison for putting their medical training into action by assisting the driver before first responders arrived. Dominic was driving in a morning snowstorm when he watched a Buick driver attempt to turn right before sliding through the snow and colliding with the school bus in front of him. Even though the Buick was going too fast, Dominic told us the bus driver wasn't furious with the Buick driver. Nobody was injured in the collision, but the bus sustained 2 flattened tires and the Buick was severely damaged. After checking on everyone and making sure first responders were on the way, Dominic went on his way, probably headed to see Brian. He wanted to remind everyone that snow is slippery. David was driving down a Michigan highway when he spotted this week's Tesla behaving badly. That Tesla means danger. Drives, a Model X driver nearly sideswiped a Chevy sedan before braking hard to avoid rear-ending a Ford Explorer. Maybe all that instant torque is going to their head. Cameron watched a double rear-end collision when a driver from the right slammed into a car, pushing it into the back of a stopped SUV. Even though the light was green, traffic ahead had stopped, and the Ford Explorer driver had also stopped to avoid ending up stuck in the intersection and possibly blocking cross-traffic if the light changed. Another driver learned the hard way why you should watch the space ahead of you rather than fixating on the traffic light itself. Cameron gave his business cards to the victims so they could reach out for his dashcam footage. Michael was approaching an intersection with a green light when another driver suddenly pulled in front of him. With no way to stop his Nissan Pathfinder in time, Michael was forced to rear-end the meandering minivan. The impact totaled his Pathfinder, but thankfully, its airbags protected everyone inside from any injuries. Ian also had an SUV driver turn across his lane, but he wasn't able to avoid slamming into it at almost 40 miles per hour. Once again, the SUV driver had failed to yield to oncoming traffic. Thankfully, Ian wasn't seriously injured, and he's now waiting to find out what will happen to his Jeep Renegade. This commuter was headed home after a long day of work. He had just filled his gas tank and was planning to start a vacation the next day as he began making an unprotected left turn through an intersection. That's when the driver of a Toyota RAV4 tried to pass him in the middle of the turn. Only our submitter's quick reflexes protected him from the other driver's reckless and illegal maneuver. The RAV4 driver then seemed to brake check our submitter, so he kept his distance and pointed out his dashcam. At the next red light, he tried to get our submitter to pull up so he could talk to him, but he wasn't taking any chances. Our submitter now wonders if the Toyota driver was going to apologize, but I think his facial expression from earlier might be a clue as to what kind of mood he was in. What do you think? Gray was on his way to lunch with friends when the driver of a Ford Ranger suddenly cut him off, sideswiping his Chevy Malibu. At first the pickup driver pulled over, but before Gray could talk to him, he sped off again. Several minutes later, he finally pulled over, but then he denied that any collision had taken place. Once police responded, Gray says they issued the pickup driver several citations before he and his friends finally left to go get lunch. Braden was driving in snowy Michigan when the Jeep in front of him lost control and started sliding toward an oncoming SUV. Come on, come on! Oh, missed it by that much. Braden stopped to make sure everyone was okay, and he doesn't think anyone was seriously injured, but it was definitely painful to watch if nothing else. Mitchell was on his way to work one morning when the 70-mile-per-hour traffic suddenly came to a dead stop. He'd given himself plenty of stopping distance and was able to stop, but the same wasn't true of the driver behind him. Mitchell estimates that the Ford Escape rear-ended his Jeep Grand Cherokee at about 35 to 40 miles per hour. A Kia following the Ford was unable to escape colliding with it as well, but Mitchell is hopeful the owner can afford to repair it. The driver of the Ford Escape was very pregnant, according to Mitchell, and was taken to a hospital. As far as he knows, nobody was seriously injured in the collision. Sadly, his Jeep will probably be totaled due to a bent frame. Alex is 16 and worked hard to earn money to buy his '98 Ford Mustang. A few weeks after installing a dashcam, he encountered a wandering SUV driver while waiting in a center turn lane. Thankfully, the SUV that was approaching him at 60 miles per hour swerved back over at the last second. Alex said, "You can wait to send that text, and don't kill someone with your massive SUV." We couldn't agree more, Alex. Dan is an Uber driver who was on his way to pick up a passenger. After stopping at a four-way stop, he continued, only to be surprised when a driver from the right ran their stop sign. The other driver hit Dan's Nissan Kicks as he flew through the stop sign. Both drivers pulled over to exchange information, and Dan is now waiting to find out what it'll cost to repair his vehicle. Devin was headed to an antique store when an oncoming minivan ran a red light and got hit by another minivan. Devin stopped to check on the drivers and called 911. First responders arrived in minutes, and thankfully there were no serious injuries. He offered the police a copy of his dashcam footage, but so far they haven't responded. Randall was driving down a snowy Michigan highway when he watched a Ford Escape lose control and go sliding off the road, down an embankment and into a guardrail. Randall didn't stop, but it looks like the impact wasn't too serious. Don't forget to put on those winter tires when the snow starts to fall, slow down, and leave earlier to arrive on time. Dean was headed home after picking up his 7-year-old from school. As he drove through an intersection notorious for red light runners, he wasn't surprised at what happened right in front of him. Dean said that if he hadn't stopped for the van, it would have impacted his truck right where his 2-year-old was sitting. All he could do was shake his head and continue on with his day.